Good morning, guys. I'm just going to give it a couple of minutes here to let some people join in, and then we'll get right into it. Let me know in the chat here how the quality of the stream is. I've never tried streaming before live, so you let me know in the chat. Do note that on a live stream there's about 9 seconds, 10 seconds or so of lag, so whatever I say, you're probably hearing it about 9 seconds after I say it. So obviously in the pre-market we're not looking to place any trades. We're just kind of getting a feel for what the market's doing, looking at some potential setups. So time isn't really sensitive in the pre-market, but just know, there is a little bit of a delay. So be aware of that. And we'll again give this a little bit of time to let a few more people join. We'll probably get going. Let's call it at 8:40. We'll give them 4 more minutes to get inside here, and then we'll just start diving into the pre-market prep sort of deal with starting with futures, then scanning through some stocks. Looks like someone is saying there's some noise present. Is that through the microphone or is it just static noise? Let me know, and I can certainly take a look into that. The vision's a little bit blurry. Yeah, I was sort of afraid of that. Try I believe the stream should be 1080p. You can set it to 1080p, and that will work. So give that a little bit of a try. And going forward, I might have to play with some of the settings a little bit. But okay, so static. Maybe it's just my mic. It's not a very high quality mic. I can jump into the sound settings though and see what's going on there. It looks like here. Notifications. Okay, so this is all new to me, guys, in terms of the actual stream itself. So I apologize if it's blurry on your end. On mine, it looks fine, even in the YouTube, preview here. But it does say that it's been dropping some frames, 65% over the last 2 minutes. I don't really know what that all means yet, so it's kind of going to be a learning experience here this morning. But we'll see what happens here, right? Open performance window. Let's see. In the performance window, it says the stream is experiencing issues. So again, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with that, but it looks like some people, have been seeing it just fine. Some people not. So I apologize if you're on the not end. Again, we'll sort of figure this out as time goes on and we get better and better. So, all right, looks like there's about 32 people in here now. Happy to start doing this now. Again, if you're just joining, I do want to make you aware that there's about a 9-second delay, 10-second delay between what you're hearing and real time. So although it's not time sensitive in the pre-market, it's something to be aware of. We're going to start off today by looking at the futures as always. This is sort of where I start every morning. So over here, and again, you're probably getting this a little bit late, but I'm going to maximize our futures sell. And we'll just check in on what happened in the overnight. Alright, so futures obviously went for a nice move here, sort of right out of the gates early on in the overnight session, but you can tell we're fading off of that, we're giving it all back. It sort of looks like a balanced session to me for now. So, I mean, by balanced, what I mean is we have something like this, obviously, right? Sideways channeling action. And what's most notable about this is the fact that we have the distribution here forming sort of above this area from yesterday's highs. So hopefully everyone can see that. So we have a slightly bullish slant, right? The fact that we're accepting prices higher here into sort of all-time high territory as opposed to the opposite, which would be failing back down into the range real hard. So to me, this is giving us a little bit more confidence that maybe buyers remain in control through the end of the week. And I'm just realizing now that you are not able to see the annotations that I'm making with my mouse because I can only show you what's happening on this screen. So in order to fix that, let's try drawing with this tool here. Basically, what I was saying is that there's this move up, right, in the pre-market, and then we gave it all back and came into this area of balance. And for the area of balance, let me go ahead and draw it in like this, and hopefully now you guys are seeing this. Let me know in the chat if this is starting to make sense? Can you see now the drawings that I'm making on the chart? I know I sort of missed that on the first go around here, but what I was getting at is the same exact thing. We're balancing here above the prior day's sort of range. So let me know if you guys can now see these drawings and it is making more sense instead of me just talking about a static screen. Hopefully that's better. Good. Okay, it looks like some people are saying the static might be some people's headphones. A little bit of static, but picture is good. 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 All right, it looks like we're getting there. We're getting there. So, all things considered, looks slightly bullish here in the pre-market in futures because we're holding up above the highs of sort of yesterday. In terms of drawing in our levels, let's go ahead and do that. They're obviously going to change as we get closer to the actual open of the market. So, in order to do this, I'm going to clean up the studies here. I always sort of do this in the morning. Get rid of the VWAP bands, go back to some simple moving averages. We have the 20, which I usually remove, and then the 50 and the 200 are usually the most important, right? So clean up this. We already talked about this. We will remove you. And we will remove you. And we'll adjust, of course, our overnight high to the true overnight high, which is around 41.0250. And then we will come in and do the same for yesterday's high. And this is where it gets a little interesting. Some people actually like to just use the 4 o'clock cash close high, but I would definitely take into account the 4:15 session here, the last 15-minute bar from yesterday. So that's where I draw my yesterday high from. Some people, again, use the cash close at 4. We're going to go ahead and mark out that overnight low now by adjusting this up to here. And this, again, is value area high. And to get these values, I'm going to log into my futures trading account, which again shouldn't come up on the stream because I'm just sharing the actual window, not my desktop here. But we will go over there and grab some values for our value area high and low. So in here, and we're logged in. All right. So prior day's value area high is at 40.88 even. So what I'll do is I typically come in here, just type it right in. Again, you guys probably are not seeing this pop-up window, and I can't even type in it actually. I don't know what's going on here. Wow, this whole streaming thing's kind of funky. You can tell I'm obviously very new to this, but we'll have to just manually adjust it to, what did we say? 40.88 even, so 40.88. There we go. So that's close to 40.88 there. That's value area high. And value area low, let's go ahead and plot that. That is going to be at 40.79 quarter. Okay, so 40.79 quarter. Right about there. And there we go. That's sort of the bulk of our levels. We need to obviously get the overnight, or excuse me, yesterday's low in there. And after we plot this out, I will take a check in the chat and see if everything's all good. So let's take a scroll over to the chat now and see what's going on there. Still static might be people's headphones. Static, yes. Picture good. Really blurry now. So NugTL, I apologize for the blur on your end. It looks like other people are having an okay picture. Again, try setting the stream to 1080p. You can click the gear icon in the bottom right hand corner of your YouTube window and then just set it to HD. That may help. Again, I do know also that I am experiencing some frame dropping, I suppose it's called. That the streaming software is letting me know there. It's saying your stream is experiencing issues, so on and so forth. It keeps saying it's dropping frames. Some people are saying it's fine. Some people are, experiencing a little bit of blur. But again, this will be a learning process as we go forward. So we're going to continue on here. In terms of what the futures are doing as of now, again, we know that the session is balanced here in the overnight, which is a good thing, right? Because basically what it's telling us is that if there was a stronger seller present, and do keep in mind, again, I'm catching myself drawing here with the tool as opposed to in the actual app. So keep in mind, if this area here does start to break, then we might have to reassess a little bit, and we may have a choppy day on our hands, because as we know, if we sort of open below that overnight low, below value area high, rules kind of state there that we're going to experience some chop at the open. We should get some two-sided trade. It shouldn't be that clear cut as to who's going to be in control, and obviously we know that the gap will or there is no gap, right? So gaps tend to make it a little bit easier to actually pick a direction, because we have that extreme imbalance of the overnight inventory. But again, as we know, if we're opening in value and sort of inside of prior day's range, no gap, it makes things a little bit more difficult. We could experience a choppy open, so that is something to at least keep in mind. Again, that's if we break down below value area high around 40.88, and then 40.87, of course, the true overnight low. So that's going to be it on the futures front for now. We'll check back in much closer to the actual market open, see if we have to adjust any of our levels. But for now, we'll head back over to the actual option side, stock side here. And what I want you guys to do is, if you have any requests of something that you want to see talked about on the stream, definitely let me know in the chat. I can sort of take those into consideration. And remember, there is about a 9 to 10 second delay here. So when you submit your tickers that you want to see covered, it's not going to be instant. We'll take a minute to get there. So first thing I'm going to do is obviously draw out some levels on SPY in case you want to play the SPY options. Very similar to what we just talked about in the ES futures, but to do this, we obviously need to turn on our extended hours trading session. So we'll do that by clicking here, and we are in. And again, so in SPY, the critical level that I would want to pay attention to here as a major resistance is probably just 409.50. Okay, so 409.50 is on the radar for a sort of break here in SPY, and that would be here. So we'll map that out. Of course, the true overnight high is up there at 409.79. And one thing I also want to point out here, and you guys may remember me saying this in the past, is that overnight highs, if that is the all-time high, okay, so I mean, it's not set in stone, it doesn't have to happen. However, it's very unlikely that the all-time high is ever set in a overnight session, so something to keep in mind there. And you'll see me marking here in two different colors. I have the gold and the blue, and basically all that's telling me here is, the gold is sort of the first entry piece, and then the blue would be, okay, we're truly over the overnight high. Okay, so gold and blue is just what I like to use. It obviously differentiates it from the white that we use just as common levels. Gold can also mean gaps on my charts, as I'm sure you guys have seen in the past. But that's sort of SPY, and we know, again, we're opening sort of down a lot lower, so those levels may or may may not, there we go, come into play early this morning. We'll just continue on through the watch list here. I like to see where we're at on the daily, obviously on the left, and then of course see the pre-market there on the right, just to get a feel. So obviously here a big difference in picture in the Qs and tech. And you'll notice that, of course, we're breaking underneath prior day's low. So I'm going to mark off prior day's low because that's an important reference piece there. And what I'll do is change that to blue. Again, just differentiating it from our daily levels. And I reset these every day, right? That's why you don't see blue and yellow lines unless it's a major gap on the chart. But as of right now, opening below prior day's low, so maybe this is a little bit more of a tell as well, that we see a little bit of push and pull between the tech sector as well as the S&P as a whole. Maybe that causes for some chop today, who knows. But basically Qs, a little bit of a short bias here now that we're breaking prior day's low. Obviously there's a gap to fill underneath that to the high of what was that, Wednesday, and that value would be 332.48. For those of you who don't know how I'm just getting that value by hovering the mouse here, it's right up here. You can see, again, I can't draw with the annotation tool, but this H box, and then it has a value inside of it. That's just telling us the high of whatever candle we are hovering over. IWM will be the last piece of the broad market to check in on, and we'll see what's going on over here. This one isn't gapping down, right? It's more like the S&P, where we have a move lower off of the overnight high, essentially back down into range. I generally don't tend to actually trade the IWM, right? It's more of a tool to gauge sentiment across the market. The setup could be fantastic, but I find that, you know, Qs and SPY and obviously the futures make for a much better vehicle to actually trade some of these instruments with. So that's the idea behind the IWM. It's just to get a feel for, you know, what else is happening, mainly across the small caps, obviously. So IWM right back down into range, more like the S&Ps. Nothing too major going on here. Worth noting with an annotation at least. Now let's move into our core list of companies. I'm going to take a break. Not a break, but I'm going to check in on the chat here and see what's going on, if you guys have recommended anything. And I will just remind you one more time that anything you're seeing here is probably delayed on your end about 10 seconds, 10-15 seconds. I'm not sure how bad it gets with, you know, a deteriorating stream. However, again, it's the first time we're doing this and we're figuring it out, and hopefully you know, we can do more of these going forward. So in the chat, it looks like we have Boeing, Tesla, Shopify, Peloton, STPK. That one, not familiar with that one. And what else? Walmart, PLTR. So we'll get into these things, right? So looks good for now. I will get into those recommendations, but as always, we are going to cover our you know, core list of companies first, and we'll talk about any key breaks just based on what's happening in the pre-market. So thank you guys for the recommendations. Keep tuning in here, and you know, we'll cover some of those in just a moment. Apple. You gotta remember too, with many of these companies that we sort of look at on a day-to-day basis, keep in mind that look at how far we've already traveled. So if I draw in again, this isn't really supposed to be a trend line that we want to pay attention to. It's more of a measure of how far we've come. We're up about $11.50 here in Apple over a very short period of time, right? So I'm not trying to say that it needs to pull back. You guys know I don't really preach that stuff like, oh, we're overextended, we have to pull back to, you know, 126, 125 in Apple. We're just loading puts here. You know, that's not really my MO, but you know, it's something that I keep in the back of my mind. It's not like I just write that stuff off and, you know, we don't pay attention to how far the move has actually come. So it comes as no surprise, right, that Apple's sort of fading in the pre-market. We're trading back down into the prior day's range, and that's fine, right? But until we actually start to break some key levels, we're not looking for, you know, puts or shorting the top, essentially, right? So what I want to make annotation of here on this chart is just yesterday's low, right? So, excuse me, reason being for yesterday's low is, and again, I'm just changing this to blue. I'm pretty sure you cannot see the dialog box, so I apologize for that, but just changing it to a blue color here. And again, the idea here is if we break yesterday's low, we're looking for a trade to fill the gap underneath, right? And again, the high of the candle and the full gap fill is to about 127.92. Call it 128 the whole dollar, right? That should generally act as some support. Nice round number there. It's a whole dollar. I'm sure there are plenty of orders sitting there, so keep that in mind on Apple. Next up is Netflix, and I'll just remind you, again, I can't really draw here over the screen, so just follow my cursor for a moment. You'll notice Netflix, look at the pre-market volume on Netflix compared to everything else on the watch list, okay? Netflix it can be a good one to play, right? It respects patterns and it moves nicely. However, the volume is always very light. And when you get light volume, you know, you run into liquidity issues. So although it may move nicely, we're not actually able to trade it as cleanly as we'd like to. So always keep that one in mind when you're trading Netflix. Always try to use limit orders. You'll generally take a pretty big beating if you try to market in to a stock like Netflix, especially on options. You know, the spread can start to get anywhere up above 50 cents, and, you know, $50 per contract just, you know, to enter is a pretty hefty price to pay. In terms of where Netflix is in the pre-market, not really seeing anything too impressive. Again, choppy here, low volume, opening in the middle of yesterday's range, so we'll move on. Tesla, what's going on with this one from a daily perspective? Looks like it's holding on to that 20 SMA, or trying to at least. Maybe a little bit of a daily bull flag, right? But overall, we know that we're still sort of putting in lower highs. Again, I can't draw with the annotation tools, but if I just do something like this, you'll notice that we have a high here, sort of a lower grouping of highs right about here, and this, you could call it an equal or lower high. So depending on how you want to look at it there, we could or could not be, again, depending on your time frame, it could be a downtrend, or we could be resolving an uptrend, right, based on our 200 SMA green line down below here. So in terms of that, again, Tesla, it's proven to be choppy. Did it have a great week? Not really, just kind of faded, while many other things actually went higher, right? So kind of an interesting one here on Tesla. In terms of pre-market levels to pay attention to, we're sort of opening or trading right around a critical support from the prior day. So I would want to have this sort of pivot area marked off on my charts as we head into the morning. And again, I just tend to make these lines blue or yellow depending on how important it is. So this one will remain blue for now, and that's Tesla. So, again, opening smack in the middle of the prior day's range, it doesn't give us a whole lot of clarity right out of the gates. And, I know this is the first stream. It would be great if I could just say, okay, good, Tesla long above this level, short below this level, but it's just not the way the market works, right? So we have to play it as it lies, and as it sits right now, I would probably be waiting for an intraday setup here on Tesla. Maybe we, accept above this level, we look for a bull flag to form, and then we're long on the bull flag breakout, okay? But as of right now, it's not really looking like something I want to just long right out of the gates, based on the pre-market selling, based on the fact that we're actually violating this level by a little bit. So that's kind of how I would think about Tesla into the open here. Alibaba, we know that this one is an absolute atrocious trader, just gap up, gap down, gap up, gap down, back and forth here. And after Alibaba, I will take a pause to look at the chat and acknowledge you guys. That is part of the deal, right? We kind of want to build a little bit of a community here and make sure that everyone is being addressed in the chat. So as we sort of talk about Alibaba, this one looks actually phenomenal for a bit of a short, right? If we break this critical daily level, and let me just zoom in on the daily chart, you'll notice it's this sort of 225, 224.90-ish area that we have mapped out as a critical piece of daily support. If that flushes and we get no sort of gap fill above, it can go lower, right? And the target here on something like this would just be probably down to this area in here, these lower wicks, if you will. So let's put a value to it, about 223, so about a 2 delta move to the downside. And Alibaba, if I had to pick an option to trade on this one as of this morning, we can delete this iron condor. We will go to, we probably want to be 7 days out. Again, if you're up on the week and you have some cash to spend on weekly options, maybe you play the weeklies. But if you don't and you're red, you're not trying to hit a home run here. And again, I'm not saying to just go out and buy a put on Alibaba just because I'm covering this in the pre-market stream. Does not mean you just automatically short it. We have a technical level that is being approached, and if we get a setup that forms, then we take the trade. But for now, if I had to pick a option expiring today to trade, it would have to be the 225, right? We're going to be opening slightly in the money if we're below 225, and you can see that our delta is going to be about a 46, which is sort of what I shoot for, right? You're looking for anything from 40 to 50 delta there, and that is going to be the most bang for your buck. Anything more in the money, and obviously because it's expiration day, your delta is going to be huge, but just remember, delta works both ways, right? If the option moves against you, you're now losing that delta. So it's a double-edged sword, right? So we tend to tame it down and look for about that 50-cent delta. So probably the 225 put if we open above, and the 222.50 put if we open below 225. So that's how I'd look at Alibaba here. You'll notice we're sort of right at it. It would be a double bottom if we bounced, got a little bit of consolidation higher, and then we could maybe take the break if we consolidate above, and then boom, flush that level. So that's Alibaba. Now we'll check in on the chat and see what's going on there, see what you guys are up to. Looks like good luck Savutu. We just covered Apple a little while ago. Looks like the voice is getting a little messed up. Okay. It looks like my voice is getting messed up. So apologies for the robo voice, but it looks like that might be something we have to sort of troubleshoot as we move forward here. So I will take that into consideration. I'm making some notes on how we might be able to improve the stream as the time goes on here. If you're new to the stream, again, probably about a 9-second, 10-second, 15-second delay, depending on how good my Wi-Fi is, how good the streaming software is working, how good your Wi-Fi is, right? So keep that in mind, delay. So apologies if I'm not up to date with the chat immediately. Let's see what else is going on there. Nvidia, we'll get to Nvidia. We just covered Tesla. Mohammed, we'll go back to that 4-hour chart once we run through the full watch list. And let's continue on. If you haven't hit the thumbs up button already, go ahead and do that. It'd be a huge help to the stream, and let me know that you guys actually enjoy this. Again, the more thumbs up I get from this probably would be an indication that I'll do it again in the future, and I'll try to troubleshoot these issues as things to look into and improve upon for the next stream. We'll move on to Facebook. And Facebook is obviously been on a very, very impressive breakout from the resistance trend line. Offered, one pullback here, and now sort of just grinding higher. It looks like in the pre-market here, this could be a great setup as well for a little bit of an exhaustion pullback. So if we just draw in our blue level, again, 310, the whole dollar here is a, let's make that blue, there we go. 310 is going to be a pre-market low, and it's also a bit of a flush point, right? That's the prior day's low, and if we trade underneath it, basically what we're looking at as a target would be, a prior reference point here from support in the past, and you could say that 307.33 would be your target to the downside. Again, you guys know how I operate. If we break 310, I'm probably going to just take it for a couple points, maybe down to 308. Maybe I even take it off at 309. Again, I'm not saying we just short this blindly out of the gates. That's one thing I want to make abundantly clear with these pre-market streams. I'm not telling you, again, you don't just short this because we're at the level at the pre-market. We could see a counter trend bounce because we're oversold in the pre-market, right? So we need the setup to truly form intraday before we can actually take action. So again, some consolidation above 310 and then the break, fantastic. So here's two different scenarios for you, right? If we open and Facebook sort of hovers around this area and we do not accept above 311, so follow my cursor. Again, I can't really draw here. Maybe I can do this actually. We'll go back to this trend line thing. So if Facebook opens, and now I'm not able to click, there we go. If Facebook opens, consolidates up here, does something like this, and then we fail to break 311, or we set a lower high on this second sort of bounce. Again, this is all theoretical. Then we're going to take the break of 310 to trade it lower, right? So that's sort of how I think about these setups. If we open underneath, then you're looking for an opening drive up to that level. So let me clear that out, and then we'll draw on the opposite scenario. So say we open up. Again, if Thinkorswim gives me some trouble with clicking sometimes. I'm not sure if it's my mouse or the platform or what. But if we open up below, we're looking for an opening drive higher. Do we back test and fail at 310? In which case, you take it underneath the low of the day, again, for a move closer to that 307 support that we just checked out from an intraday candle the prior couple of days. Okay, so this is how I sort of think about these levels and what's going to happen as we head into the open here. Let's go ahead and move on from Facebook. We have our level there at 310. Nvidia is up next. Someone did ask for this in the chat. From a daily perspective, again, keep in mind how far we've already traveled here. We printed an inverted hammer candle yesterday, larger upper wick at a known area of resistance, right? You can see a little bit of trouble there. It was prior support, prior resistance in here. If I scroll back even further, there it is again. So this is definitely a critical level on our daily chart here, 573.52. And yeah, I would be biased and say that we're probably going to expect a little bit of a pullback. As we saw with some of tech, it's a little bit weak, right? Remember back to what we saw in the Qs. The Qs we saw were going to actually be on a gap down, okay? And it looks like Nvidia is as well. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me to see this thing cool off. I wouldn't expect for a huge sort of move lower in Nvidia. I would sort of look for a little bit of a pullback, right? But overall, don't want to fight that daily trend. So if we sort of maybe take out the pre-market low, I'd say 566 at this point is the level that you want to watch out for. Again, depending on where we open, we still have about 25 minutes until the bell rings. There could be some action in here. But Nvidia, again, if we open above 566, you're basically looking for consolidation above the level, exactly what we talked about in Facebook, right? Except I would say Facebook is probably a better setup because we have clean intraday levels to go off of, right? Nvidia here is kind of opening, it's below yesterday's low already. It's not quite at the pre-market low. I wouldn't call it as strong of a setup as what we just saw and looked at on Facebook. So Nvidia, if it does go 566 is probably your line in the sand for this morning's over or under trade, and I would probably just avoid chasing it long, honestly. Maybe you get a little bit of a gap fill since we are technically opening on a gap down, but again, I wouldn't really bank on that considering how far we've traveled and the fact that we're opening up at sort of critical resistance. Let's move on to Microsoft here. We'll get through the watch list and then I'll move on to some of these recommendations from the chat. If you're new to the chat, again, remember there's about a 10 to 15 second delay here. Microsoft, fantastic setup. Okay, so this is almost exactly what I want to be looking for every single day in the pre-market. This to me is like the golden setup, right? We have the prior day's low, we have the pre-market low. I'm going to map this out as blue. So there we go. We have our blue level right at 252, a whole dollar. We're consolidating above it in the pre-market. Again, we know that there's about 25 minutes to go. In a perfect world, we would hold this level into the market open. We would actually bounce a little bit higher, right? If we got a little bit of a bounce higher, say Microsoft started to trade up into this area, does something like this, we're looking again for any signs of weakness here, a lower high to form, and then if we retest that 252, bang, that's your entry short there for a ride lower. In terms of the daily chart, again, keep in mind, picture perfect setup here. There is a gap below to fill to the high of Wednesday's candle if we grab the right tool here and map that out. So your gap is filling down to about 251, so about one delta move out of Microsoft, and you know, it's not a whole lot of dollar value, right? But Microsoft is an extremely clean mover and something that I like to keep a close eye on. So beautiful setup here in the pre-market on Microsoft. All it needs to do now is hold on to this 252 before the bell, and then if we open above, great to see a little bit of consolidation, then the level break. If we open below, we're looking for maybe a snappy flush. Don't chase it, right? Don't chase it on the open. Wait for maybe a little bit of a back test of that 252 or any sort of dead cat bounce, right? And then you take it short as we flush that low. So that's sort of the idea here on Microsoft, very similar to what we just talked about in Facebook. We'll wrap up the core watch list with Amazon. Amazon can be a fun one to trade on Fridays, right? Especially because if we check in on our options chain, we'll let this load here on the options expiring today. Let's close this down to about 12 and let this data load. Loading. There we go. We get some values coming in. Looks like the stream actually suffered a little bit as I tried to load that. So apologies there. Anyways, on Amazon, what can be really cool about this is we have cheaper premiums, right? So instead of looking at $5,000 options, we're looking at cut that in half, $2,000 options. So basically our options become much more playable. Even if you want to go way out of the money here on Amazon, again, remember that this is not something you do if you're down on the week and you're looking for a home run. But if you're up, if you have some nice cushion, maybe you get something way out, right? Maybe you're looking at like 164 for a 3365. I'm not saying this. This is purely an example, right? We're just talking about actual pricing of premiums here, not direction. We haven't even looked at the charts yet, but keep in mind our premiums are cheap here in Amazon, and it moves deltas, right? So a $10 move, a 10 delta move in Amazon, that's $70, and that could happen in the blink of an eye, and then that's just one contract, right? If you bought 10 of them, there's $700 on Amazon. So I'm not a big advocate on gambling on a Friday, but if you have some cushion, if you've been up on the week, if you have a nice pad to the week, maybe you allocate a very, very small percentage of those profits to something like an Amazon out of the money play on a Friday. It's just an idea. I do it every now and then. It's not like a trade I default to, but just something to keep an eye on, right? So going back to the charts and seeing if there's even a setup here before we get too gung-ho about those options pricings. Let's go ahead and have a look. And Amazon, so it's going to be opening on a gap down, true gap down, right, out of prior day's range, and it's opening in this choppy zone from the prior two days prior, right? So this large green candle here, you'll notice that, of course, we're opening in this zone. So there is potential for some chop at the open. It doesn't look abundantly clear to me yet what direction Amazon may be headed. So again, although we got kind of excited there, a little bit of ahead of ourselves with those options pricings, you always got to default to the chart and make sure there's something valid to actually be looking at before you take any action. So Amazon kind of opening in chop zone. I would say the flush here and the downside play is only if we sort of break down below this kind of area of support, maybe 32.78 we'll call it. So again, keep in mind we are opening on a gap down. If we get a flush out of the gates lower, look for that to act as support. Maybe we get a bounce a little bit higher to maybe fill the gap from the prior day, in which case you're looking for weakness up around 32.92 for a gap fill reversal, right? So I would want to have that marked off on my Amazon chart as well. We'll change that to blue, and we'll change this lower support to yellow just to know what is what. And that's going to wrap up the traditional watch list, right? So I'm going to clean this up. We know some things to be watching out for. Obviously, the Microsoft setup is picture perfect and ideal. And wow, look at that. Okay, so beautiful here in Microsoft in the pre-market, as noted by this, candle bouncing off of the 252 level. It means we're not going to have to chase it at the open, hopefully, right? Fingers crossed here. There's still 20 minutes to the bell, but 252 is still a critical level on my charts. Let's go ahead and check in on the chat, make sure everything is doing well over here. In the chat, let's see. It looks like we got thank yous. Got minor problems. Please keep going. Will do. That's the plan here. Okay. Good luck. Glad to hear that we covered Apple there. Voice is clear on your side. Awesome to hear. Appreciate that. And now we have some tickers to look at based on some recommendations. Good. All right, so let's start from the top. That way we give people credit who joined here a little bit earlier. I'll just remind you, if you've enjoyed the stream, if you've enjoyed the info so far, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button. That's all well and good. Basically, it's just going to give me a gauge on whether or not I should keep doing these. Maybe we do Friday pre-market preps. Again, the more thumbs up, the more it kind of means to me that I have to look into some of these issues and maybe get a little bit of a better streaming setup. That way we can resolve some of this stuff. So first ticker recommendation we got was from Come to Life, and I appreciate you joining the stream here. And it's going to be on Boeing, right? So Boeing is actually a great trader. I've really considered sort of editing this watch list here and adding it to the watch list because it's something I'm often looking at as well. I cleaned the chart up yesterday. I'm going to start from scratch. That's something I always recommend to you guys. If you find that your chart levels are, outdated, they're really, like for example, I had some stuff marked in from down here, and it's like, we're not trading down there anymore. I don't need to pay attention to those levels. I don't need to distract myself. So I like to sort of reset the chart every now and then. But in Boeing, right, kind of in an interesting spot. Because we're in an uptrend, I would be biased to the upside. Obviously, we have 20 SMA stacking over 50 and 200, but we have a lower high that's formed here, right? So something to keep in mind is, could this be the start of a little bit of trend reversal? So there is your high. We could get a click here. Again, do you guys have this issue? I would love to know if anyone else has this issue in Thinkorswim. Sometimes I can get a click, sometimes I can't get a click. But there would be our lower high, right, on Boeing. So could this potentially be the start of a rollover? I don't know. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that no, it's going to continue on the uptrend because of the nice stacking here on the daily. But at the end of the day, we just have to play the chart as it lies. This one looks great in the pre-market. Just based on this aggressive action here, I would expect some sort of dead cat bounce out of the gates, but the short level is just underneath prior day's low at this point. Because we're opening so close to it, maybe it acts as a magnet and it pulls it down there, but again, you're not going to chase setups like this out of the open or out of the gates here, and that's just the nature of the beast. Okay, if you want to look at this from a risk-friendly perspective, that is not a smart short, right? Targeting prior day's low. The smart short, again, look at that. So many clicks there just to get the platform to give me the line. Let me know if you guys struggle with that. It's really annoying. The smart short is looking for the dead cat bounce, any signs of weakness here, and then a breakdown of that 249.50 area for, on here from the daily. It looks like there's some room to run actually. Let's go ahead and scrunch this up a bit. I'm going to get rid of those dotted lines. get rid of this, and let's see. Can we even, is there anything there? No, nothing there. So we're going to go, in an instance like this where we don't have enough intraday data, you just zoom the chart out, right? So I would go to like a 1 hour, 90 day, just give us a basic idea of where we could potentially flush to. So that's the area of support. You can see, basically, there is some room to run to the downside. I'd say the next major area of congestion is probably closer to 245, right? So I wouldn't look for the full $4 flush again, especially given that the daily uptrend is, still intact. Technically, we have a higher low continuing to form. Green hammer yesterday, sure, we're giving back some of it as of right now, but again, you don't want to chase that short based on how far it's already traveled and look for a huge amount of downside activity. You're looking for probably 2 points here on Boeing, maybe hold a piece out for continuation if we get the true follow through. And again, opening here, pretty tough. You don't want to chase it short into yesterday's low, but if we get a bounce, some consolidation above, that's your breakdown point there at 249.50. Let's go ahead and check in on someone else. We had Tesla. We already covered Tesla. Credit Genius, I hope you were there for that, but you did recommend Shopify, so we'll go ahead and take a look at SHOP quickly. And what I want to do is, of course, give ourselves enough time here to look at the futures market just one more time before we sign off for the pre-market prep and get back into the Discord. If you're tuned in and you're not in the Discord, there is a link down below in the description where you can join the Discord. It's where we send out intraday alerts. We just generally talk about the market as a whole. It's a great place to bounce ideas off each other. So if you're interested in that, it's completely free. It's the last link down below in the description, discord.gg, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure you can find it. Jumping over to Shopify, though, let's break out the 5-minute chart here. Of course, see where we're at pre-market. Obviously, breaking out of that range yesterday was really impressive. And we talked about this in the midweek market update, right? We had 4 days of consolidation and balance. Boom, big breakout day, and we actually closed above the 50 SMA. As we're trading right now, it looks like, let's see where we're at. So we're currently trading 1210. And the 50 SMA value here is at 1216.87. So we're currently back below the 50 SMA. That's probably your long breakout point, right? So over prior day's high, it actually looks like a pressure cooker top as well. So great long setup here in Shopify. Might be a little tough to take if the Qs, continue to see some sell side activity and pull back a little bit. But Shopify, your breakout point is right above 1225, right? Look at that perfect pressure cooker top into the end of the day on yesterday. If we can get back up to that level, that's where you're looking for longs to, again, move into this greater target that we discussed, closer to about 1325. So about $100 higher there in Shopify. Does it happen today? Does it happen tomorrow? Into the end of next week? Maybe, right? I wouldn't be looking for the move in one day, that's for sure. One thing to keep in mind is check in on this volume down here. Follow my cursor to the volume section. Good volume is supporting this move. Again, it looks fantastic for some upside continuation up and out of this range. The Qs may be sort of the only drag here on Shopify. We're going to continue on other recommendations. We had Peloton by Burke, and I believe he's still here. Let's go ahead and check in on Peloton, P-T-O-N. Again, just a reminder, this is the first stream that we have done live, truly live here, and you're probably experiencing a 10 to 15 second delay, so apologies if I'm not keeping up perfectly with the chat. It's only going to get better from here. The more thumbs up on the video, the more I'll know to try to resolve some of these issues and get a better setup for streaming. In terms of Peloton, right to the 50 SMA on the daily yesterday, and kind of an area of resistance as noted by some of these clusters of highs. Based on that alone, looking for a little bit of a pullback, right? Generally 50 SMAs are respected on that first touch. You get a little bit of pullback, as we saw in Shopify actually intraday. It pulled back perfectly, right? This is the Peloton reaction to that first touch of the 50 SMA. It pulled back, a little bit. And now, I forget what setup it was, but we're looking at something like this very similar. Maybe it was Tesla. We'll have to take a second run at that one, especially on the 4-hour chart, someone said. But here, you'll notice it was intraday support, right? And we're sort of breaking that in the pre-market to the downside. Your next critical area of support is prior highs, obviously, at 121, the whole dollar. So, if Peloton breaks underneath that, maybe you look for the flush to the low of the flag, right? And that would be the area you want to see hold if you're actually bullish on Peloton. So we'll change this to a blue line and something like this. Boom, there it is. This is obviously the target down here. If we truly get a stronger flush to the downside, it would help if obviously the Qs went lower as well. And we'll just mark that one off with a yellow, so we're aware of, kind of where those levels sit. And that's what I would be looking out for on Peloton. Don't fight the, strong move up, especially with the volume. But if the 50 SMA does prove some, to give us some pullback here, that's what I would be watching out for to the downside. I wouldn't really chase it to the upside, to be honest with you, on a day like today with the Qs gapping down. Next up from the chat, let's see what we got. What do we got? After our recommendation for Peloton was Walmart and PLTR, but there was STPK first. We're going to start running through these a little quicker. We obviously have 10 minutes till the bell, and I want to give you, a futures rundown one more time. So STPK, there we go. So this looks like a newer IPO. Not a whole lot of data here. It doesn't, to be quite frank with you, I don't trade things like this. So my advice probably isn't what you want to hear. I would avoid it, right? Obviously, we're in a bit of a downtrend. There's no clean resistance trend line in play. Obviously you could draw in something extremely steep like this, and we've broken it sideways through time at this point. But large upper wick, there was a huge influx of volume yesterday. These tend to be obviously impacted by catalysts, right? So if we just check quickly, let's see what we got. Anything important? Trading higher after a fireside chat. So basically just some news came out and a lot of people jumped on the stock. There was a huge pump. People probably chased it into the highs. I would imagine there are some people stuck long up here at the true highs of this move. Again, if they liquidate their positions, you're caught short in a bad spot with a sort of pump and dump. So I avoid these things, so I'm not going to comment too much further than that. Walmart, let's see what's going on here. Actually consolidating nicely up at these highs, but it is breaking that consolidation to the downside. So we are flushing, right? A 2-day flush point. We're opening up below it as of right now. So any sort of back tests of, let's put a level on it from the daily perspective, any sort of back tests underneath our 139.66, look for shorts down to about that 200 SMA on a deeper pullback. Probably don't want to chase it long here, but if you did, this bull flag from the daily perspective is above 141. That's sort of your entry long there, above the 2 days, 3 days maybe of consolidation, if you want to call it that. That would be Walmart, and then the one everyone loves, PLTR. Let's go ahead and have a look. Nothing to do on this thing. How many times do I have to say it? No, I respect it if you decide to trade it. That's your prerogative, but honestly, nothing to do, right? It's just going sideways. It's trapped underneath the 20. It's above the $23 figure that we always discuss. If it flushes the lows there, look for the short down to 21. If it breaks the 20 SMA, look for the long and just trade it up towards 27. Does it go all the way to 27 in one day? Probably not, right? Look at the volume just flowing out of this thing. It's very low volume right now. It's not moving very fast. I would just avoid it, right? I don't really see any value in trading a setup like this. Next up, we already talked about Walmart. We did Apple. What else? We did Nvidia. Let's go back to the Tesla 4-hour chart. Someone asked for the 4-hour interpretation of the chart. We'll quickly talk about that. The 200 SMA, I believe, is what they were calling out. And yeah, it is getting some rejection there from the 200 SMA. Again, we sort of discussed the fact that you could call it a daily bull flag. You could call it daily lower highs. At this point, we are, if we just go back to a 5-minute, so excuse me, we did acknowledge the 200 SMA, but back to the 5-minute, obviously broken now that some time has passed, that critical level of support from yesterday. So now, again, you don't chase this short out of the gates. Maybe we get a little bit of a rally up to that level. Maybe if it shows some weakness, inverted hammers print, basically, buyers dry up there, the market's rolling over, then you look for the short under the low of day or this area here, the pre-market low. Let's mark that in there now with a yellow level. That way we're aware of our two sort of ranges, if you will, and that's sort of what I would acknowledge there on Tesla. Let's go ahead and scroll it back down and check in on the chat. We already covered Shopify. Credit Genius. Fox A is up next. Let's go ahead and check in on Fox A, F-O-X-A. And again, we'll acknowledge the chat here. If you are brand new to the stream, it looks like we're having some people tune in and out, hanging out around 50 people watching. If you're new to the stream, just tuning in, there's about a 10 to 15 second delay. Obviously, it's the pre-market, and you're not following my trades anyways, but always know that there is a delay whenever you're seeing something that's quote-unquote live. you probably don't want to do exactly what they're doing because you're behind the 8 ball already based on the delay. Fox A, bear flag on the daily time frame, right, giving away a lot of this up move. I believe this had something to do with that Bill Wang blow up there. He was in a lot of these companies basically, right? We have Disc A, Fox A, Viacom, all that stuff, like broadcasting companies. I don't even really know, right? But basically, just going sideways here. Hammer off of the 50 SMA. It is forming some higher lows, and based on that, I wouldn't. The setup isn't really clear to me, right? Because there is some overhead resistance here, closer to 38, the whole dollar. And I also wouldn't really be looking for anything under 36 based on the fact that we had a hammer print. And I'm just not too familiar with this, so I would say it's a wait and see on Fox A. If anything, maybe some more daily consolidation in this area. Let me go ahead and break out this bubble tool again. Maybe some consolidation here, and then a breakdown below for continued downside underneath 35.50, right? But not really seeing the long setup here. Maybe if the hammer resolves again over 38, you look for 39 in the middle of this poor structure here. 20 SMA would be after that on the daily perspective, but just nothing clear on Fox A in my opinion. Bear flag on the daily. Burke, we did cover that BA. So again, apologize for going back. And let's go ahead. Noah Schwartz, yes, the click issue does happen on Thinkorswim, and it is very annoying. So it's a feature, not an option, right? Yeah, I love that. So thanks for commenting on that. Certainly appreciate you joining the stream here. Any other